My dad told me to thank the man who laid hands on me. When I asked why, he smiled and said, because he's making you wife material. I just hung up. That was 9 months ago. Last night, he was begging me to come home. I was 10 years old when my dad first told me to close my legs. We were sitting in a restaurant and I was fooling around, but I immediately sat up straight and followed his overly stoic protocol. From there, my childhood ended. Every dinner accompanied with a stopwatch, and if I finished before the time ran out I wouldn't get to eat breakfast or lunch the next day. When I was 12, he threw out all my sneakers, other than for school, and replaced them with heels. Don't get me wrong, I knew it wasn't exactly the best parenting method around. But whenever I brought up my doubts, my dad would somehow convince me that I was better than the other girls in my class, that I would grow up to be elegant and special. So I obliged. Fast forward to my sophomore year of college when I met Troy. He was practically my dad's wet dream. He was studying law, spent his weekends at the gun range, and spent his savings on whiskey and cigars. When I introduced Troy to my dad, he literally said the words, "I will see to it that y'all get married." I laughed, thinking it was a lighthearted comment, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't kidding. The next day, Troy was singing my dad's praises. "I've never met a man who knows how to keep a woman in line like your dad." It irked me because my childhood caused me a lot of trauma that I'm still dealing with, but I hated talking bad about my family, so I just nodded. Something shifted that day. We'd be out on dates and he'd tap my spine and whisper, "Straighten up, you're not a child." And as soon as I did, he would shower me with praise. "You don't even know how stunning you look when you sit like that." It made me blush every time. I didn't realize that I was simply continuing the cycle. And a few weeks later, reality slapped me in the face. Literally. Because that's when I came home to my dorm and noticed over half of my wardrobe was missing. I tore my room upside down looking for my clothes, but they were gone. That's when I heard a knock at the door. It was Troy. Before I could open it, he barged in. In his hands were almost 10 shopping bags, all from women's clothing stores. He emptied them out on the bed. I kept my expression neutral on purpose. "I think you might be nice," he said, completely straight-faced. "I threw out your W-word clothes and replaced them for you. Check it out." Fear ran through my body. I tried to keep my hands still as I went through each bag. Inside were floor-length skirts, extra-large jumpers, and huge scarves to cover my face. I started laughing, partly out of shock and partly because I wanted this to be some sick joke. "Well, aren't you grateful? I just spent $500 on your sorry, The sudden tone change made my nervous system jolt. I silently looked up at him, pleading with my eyes for him to calm down. Instead, his hand smacked my cheek. I pressed my tongue to the roof of my mouth to stop myself from crying. I managed to muster a "Thanks, Troy." He responded by lunging at me for a hug. "I hope you know I only do all this because I love you." I nodded, and he left to go to a lecture. As soon as the door closed, I broke down crying. I knew I needed to leave, but I was too scared to do it alone. So I called my dad. My hands were shaking so badly I had to press the call button twice. When I explained what happened, my dad provided a lot of comfort, except not towards me. It was towards Troy. "Well, if you tested him enough to make him lose his cool, then you need to take some accountability. Men don't snap for no reason." I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. "Are you listening to me?" he asked, his voice going sharp. "Yeah, good girl." I could hear the smile in his voice. "Now, when Troy gets back, I want you to thank him properly. He's putting in the work to make you better, and you owe him that respect." I just hung up. I knew breaking up with Troy meant finally cutting off my dad for good, but I did it anyway, because I had already lived my entire childhood in fear, and there was no way I was going to choose to continue suffering. I did it over text and blocked him right after. And that same day, I drove to my dad's house. I expected him to shout at me, to call me an R-worded SLit, but to my surprise, he just said, "Oh, okay," before going really silent. I figured it was some passive-aggressive attempt at manipulation, but I didn't care. In fact, it made me feel even safer with him, so much so that we planned a dinner at his house a few days later. But when I got there, my dad didn't greet me. Troy did. Well, if it isn't the woman of the hour." His voice oozed with authority, the kind that feeds on obedience. Every inch of my body was yelling at me to run away and never look back, but I ignored it. And instead, I walked right through the door with my head held high. My dad came up to me, but I interrupted him before he could speak. "Dad, thank you for doing this for me. You're right. I have been ungrateful." I proceeded to walk over to Troy and kiss him. Suddenly, I became the most powerful person in the room. They just didn't know it yet. I wore those red sneakers everywhere for the next week. To class, to the library, even to bed sometimes. They became my armor, my reminder that I was free. But freedom comes with a price. I learned that pretty quickly. The sneakers were bright crimson, with white laces and rubber soles that squeaked slightly on the polished floors of the science building. They were the first purchase I made after leaving my father's house that night, bought from a discount store with money I'd been secretly saving. They weren't expensive or particularly well made, but they represented everything my father had tried to take from me: comfort, practicality, the right to choose for myself. The restraining order against Troy had been granted immediately after I showed the police the recording from my father's house. They were particularly concerned by the coordinated effort between Troy and my father to intimidate me. The campus security office helped expedite the process, classifying it as an urgent safety concern. The police station was cold and sterile, the hard plastic chair uncomfortable beneath me as I sat across from Officer Martinez. She was a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and no-nonsense demeanor. Her fingers moved efficiently over her keyboard as she took my statement, pausing occasionally to ask clarifying questions. The recording played from her computer speakers, Troy's voice filling the small interview room. I watched her expression change as she listened. First professional neutrality, then concern, finally a hardened resolve. About 3 weeks after I got the restraining order, I came back to my new dorm room to find a small package outside my door. No return address. Inside was a silver charm bracelet I recognized immediately. My mom had given it to me before she died when I was 8. I'd kept it in my jewelry box at my dad's house all these years, too afraid he'd throw it out if I took it with me to college. There was a note with it. Thought you might want this back. Consider it a peace offering, Dad. The package was wrapped in plain brown paper, secured with clear packing tape. My name was written on it in my father's distinctive handwriting, all capital letters, perfectly aligned. The bracelet inside was nestled in a bed of cotton, the silver still bright despite years of sitting unworn in my jewelry box. I lifted it carefully, feeling the weight of it in my palm. Each charm had been selected by my mother. A tiny book for my love of reading, a miniature piano for the lessons I'd just started, a small heart that opened to reveal a microscopic photo of her. I stared at the bracelet for a long time. It was the only thing I had left of my mom, and my dad knew that. He knew exactly what buttons to push. I put the bracelet on and tried not to think about what it meant that he was reaching out. Maybe he was genuinely trying to make amends, but deep down, I knew better. This was just another manipulation tactic. The next day, I got an email from the dean's office requesting a meeting. When I showed up, Dean Patterson looked uncomfortable. "Your father called," she said without preamble. "He's concerned about your mental health, says you've been making false accusations against your boyfriend." My stomach dropped. Ex-boyfriend. And they weren't false. "I have a restraining order." She nodded. "I'm aware, but he's quite persistent." Mentioned something about potentially withdrawing financial support. Dean Patterson's office was warm and cluttered in a way that suggested actual work happened there. Books lined the walls, academic journals were stacked on the corner of her desk, and a half-empty coffee mug sat on a coaster shaped like the university mascot. The leather chair I sat in was worn soft from years of nervous students. And there it was, my dad's real play. He was threatening to stop paying my tuition. "I have a scholarship," I reminded her. "It covers most of my expenses." "Most, yes, but not all." She slid a paper across the desk. "These are the resources available if you find yourself in financial difficulty, just in case." I took the paper, my hand trembling slightly. "Thank you." The paper was warm from the printer, the university letterhead bold at the top of the page. It listed various financial aid options, work-study programs, emergency loans, scholarship opportunities. At the bottom was a handwritten note from Dean Patterson with her personal email address and a time when she would be available to talk further. As I left her office, I checked my bank account on my phone. The joint account my dad had set up for my expenses was empty. Every penny, gone. I sat down on a bench, trying to breathe through the panic. I had about $300 in my personal account. My scholarship covered tuition and basic meal plan, but not my books for next semester, not my phone bill, not any extras. My dad was cutting me off completely. The bench was cold beneath me, the October air crisp with the promise of winter. Students streamed past, laughing and talking, completely unaware of my private crisis. My phone screen glowed with the banking app, the balance mocking me with its inadequacy. I called Sadie, who met me at the campus coffee shop. I told her everything while stirring the cheapest thing on the menu, plain black coffee. "What a duck move," she said. "But you know what? This is actually good news." I looked at her like she was crazy. "How is being broke good news?" "Because it means they're desperate. They've lost control over you, so they're trying financial warfare." She grinned. "My mom's an accountant. Let's go talk to her." Sadie's mom, Patricia, was a no-nonsense woman with reading glasses perpetually perched on her nose. She listened to my story without interrupting, occasionally making notes. "First thing," she said when I finished, "you need to open a new bank account at a different bank, one your father has no connection to." I nodded. "Already planning on it." "Good. Next, we need to look at your options for financial aid. There are emergency grants for situations like this." She tapped her pen against her notepad. "And you'll need a job." By the end of the day, I had a new bank account, an appointment with financial aid, and a job application for the campus bookstore. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That night, I got a text from an unknown number. "You're making this harder than it needs to be. Call your father. Troy." I blocked the number immediately, but the damage was done. They were still working together, still trying to control me. The next day, I was walking to class when a familiar car pulled up beside me. My dad's silver Lexus. The window rolled down, but it wasn't my dad behind the wheel. It was Troy. "Just hear me out," he called. I kept walking, heart pounding. He was violating the restraining order just by being this close to me. The campus pathway was lined with maple trees just beginning to turn golden with autumn. Students passed by on either side, some glancing curiously at the slow-moving car keeping pace with me. My backpack felt suddenly heavy on my shoulders, the textbooks inside a physical burden matching my emotional one. "Your dad's worried sick," Troy continued, driving slowly alongside me. "He just wants to talk." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You're violating a restraining order. Leave now or I'm calling campus security." Troy's face hardened. "You ungrateful bitch. After everything we've done for you." Students were starting to stare. I kept walking, kept recording. "I'm counting to 3, then I'm calling." "This isn't over," Troy spat, but he drove away. The mask had slipped completely now, revealing the ugliness beneath. His handsome face was contorted with rage, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. As he accelerated away, the car's tires squealed slightly on the wet pavement. Several students had stopped to watch the confrontation, their expressions ranging from curiosity to concern. I reported the violation immediately, showed the video to campus security, then to the police. They took a report, but warned me it might be hard to prove he was within the 100-yard limit just from the video. That afternoon, I met with the financial aid office. The counselor, a kind man named Ronald, reviewed my situation. "There are options," he assured me. "Emergency aid, work-study positions, loans if necessary." I left with paperwork and a slightly lighter heart. I could do this. I could stand on my own. But my dad wasn't done, not by a long shot. The next week, I got a call from my landlord back home. I'd been renting a small storage unit for things I couldn't fit in my dorm. "Someone's been asking about your unit," he he said. Guy named Troy. Said he was your fiancé and needed to get some of his things. My blood ran cold. He's not my fiancé. He shouldn't have access. That's what I figured. Just wanted to warn you. I thanked him and hung up, then immediately called Juniper at the counseling center. They're escalating, I told her. I'm scared. The storage facility was on the outskirts of town, a series of identical metal units with orange doors and padlocks. I'd rented the smallest one available, using it to store winter clothes, books I couldn't fit in my dorm, and a few keepsakes from my childhood that I'd managed to smuggle out of my father's house over the years. The thought of Troy trying to access it, trying to inventory my possessions, perhaps planning to take or destroy them, made me feel violated all over again. Juniper helped me make a safety plan. I changed my routes to classes, started using the buddy system with Sadie and other friends, installed extra locks on my dorm room door. The campus bookstore hired me, which was a small victory. The pay wasn't great, but it was something. I worked evenings and weekends, shelving books and running the register. It was mind-numbing work, but I needed the money. One night, about a month after the restraining order, I was closing up the store alone when I saw Troy waiting outside, just standing there, staring through the glass door. I locked myself in the back office and called campus security. By the time they arrived, Troy was gone, but he'd left a note taped to the door. We need to talk. Your dad is sick. The back office was barely larger than a closet, crammed with a desk, filing cabinet, and shelves of office supplies. The single overhead light flickered intermittently, casting strange shadows on the walls. I huddled under the desk, phone pressed to my ear, trying to keep my voice steady as I spoke to the dispatcher. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure Troy could hear it through the door. I knew it was probably a lie, another manipulation tactic. But what if it wasn't? What if my dad really was sick? I called my Aunt Kathy, my dad's sister. We weren't close, but she'd always been kind to me. Is Dad okay? I asked when she answered. What? Yes, he's fine. I just had lunch with him yesterday. She paused. He didn't mention you. Relief and hurt washed over me in equal measure. Troy told me he was sick. I guess he was lying. Aunt Kathy was quiet for a moment. Your dad's not sick, but he's not fine either. He's angry, Catherine. Angrier than I've ever seen him. Because I won't let him control my life anymore? Because you've embarrassed him. The restraining order, the accusations against Troy. People are talking. I almost laughed. So this is about his reputation? It's always been about his reputation, she said softly. Ever since your mom died. He couldn't control what happened to her, so he tried to control everything else, especially you. The phone felt heavy in my hand as Aunt Kathy's words sank in. I was sitting on my bed, back against the wall, knees pulled up to my chest. Outside my window, the campus was quiet, most students already gone for the evening. A single lamp illuminated my room, casting long shadows across the floor. The charm bracelet on my wrist caught the light, the tiny book charm seeming to glow. For the first time, I wondered if my mother had seen signs of my father's controlling nature before she died, if she had worried about leaving me alone with him. After we hung up, I sat on my bed thinking about what she'd said. My dad's obsession with control, with appearances, had shaped my entire life. And now that I was breaking free, he was desperate to pull me back in. The next day, I got an email from Troy's lawyer. They were contesting the restraining order, claiming I had fabricated evidence. There would be a hearing in 2 weeks. I forwarded it to Juniper, who put me in touch with a lawyer through the university's legal aid program. His name was Jasper, and he had kind eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. They're bluffing, he said after reviewing my case. Your evidence is solid, but we should be prepared anyway. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in a state of constant anxiety. I kept going to classes, kept working at the bookstore, but I was always looking over my shoulder. Then, 3 days before the hearing, something unexpected happened. I got an email from my dad's secretary, Harley. Your father asked me to send you these documents to sign. The email read. Attached were papers transferring my car into Troy's name, the car my mom had left me, the one thing my dad couldn't legally take away because it had been specifically left to me in her will. I called Jasper immediately. Can he do this? Not without your signature, Jasper assured me. Don't sign anything, and forward me that email. The car was a modest sedan, nothing flashy, but it had been my mother's pride and joy. She had taught me to drive in it when I was just 14, letting me practice in empty parking lots on weekends. The leather seats still smelled faintly of her perfume if you knew where to sniff. There was a small dent in the passenger door from when she'd misjudged a parking space at the grocery store. The glove compartment still held the mixed CDs she'd made for road trips, carefully labeled in her neat handwriting. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about my mom, about what she would say if she could see what was happening. She had always been my dad's opposite, warm, loving, free-spirited. She would have been horrified by what he'd become. The day of the hearing arrived. I dressed carefully in a simple blouse and skirt, professional but not the conservative clothes Troy had forced on me. I wore my red sneakers. Troy and his lawyer were already there when I arrived with Jasper. My dad sat behind them, his face a mask of disapproval. I kept my eyes forward, refusing to be intimidated. The courtroom was smaller than I'd expected, with wooden benches and fluorescent lighting that buzzed faintly overhead. The air conditioning was set too cold, raising goosebumps on my arms. My red sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor as I walked to my seat, the sound seeming unnaturally loud in the quiet room. Troy wore a suit that looked new, his hair perfectly styled, his expression a carefully constructed mask of injured innocence. My father sat rigidly beside him, his posture perfect as always, his eyes fixed straight ahead. The hearing was surprisingly quick. Troy's lawyer tried to paint me as unstable, claiming I had a history of making up stories for attention. But Jasper presented the evidence methodically. The videos, the journal entries, the bruises, witness statements from Sadie and others. The judge reviewed everything carefully, then looked directly at Troy. The restraining order stands, she said firmly. And Mr. Nowak, I would advise you to abide by it. The court takes violations very seriously. Relief washed over me. I'd won this round. As we left the courtroom, my dad stepped into my path. This isn't over, he said quietly. You're making a mistake. Jasper stepped between us. Mr. Liu, I suggest you keep your distance from my client. My dad's eyes narrowed. She's my daughter. She's an adult, Jasper countered, and she's made her wishes clear. For a moment, I thought my dad might argue further, but he just shook his head and walked away, joining Troy at the elevator. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt hollow. This was my family. This was what we'd become. The next day, I went to work at the bookstore, trying to put the hearing behind me. I was restocking the psychology section when I noticed a man watching me. Not Troy, not my dad. Someone I'd never seen before. He approached as I was shelving the last book. Excuse me, are you Catherine Liu? I tensed, ready to call for help. Who's asking? He handed me a business card. Jesse Tanaka. I'm a private investigator hired by Troy Nowak. My heart skipped a hit. You shouldn't be talking to me. There's a restraining order. I'm aware. That's why he hired me. Jesse's expression was neutral. He wants me to build a case against you. Find dirt. Prove you're unstable. I started to walk away. Then why are you telling me this? Because I don't take cases that involve stalking young women. He followed me to the end of the aisle. I'm dropping him as a client, but I thought you should know what you're dealing with. I stopped, turning to face him. Why should I believe you? Jesse shrugged. You shouldn't, necessarily. But check my credentials if you want. I've been in this business 20 years. Never worked for abusers. After he left, I Googled him. He seemed legitimate, which meant Troy was escalating again, hiring someone to dig into my life. I told Jasper, who advised me to document the encounter, but not to worry too much. If this PI is legitimate and refusing the case, that's actually good news. It means Troy's getting desperate. But Troy's desperation made him more dangerous, not less. I knew that firsthand. The next week was midterms. I threw myself into studying, grateful for the distraction. The financial aid had come through. Not a lot, but enough to cover my basic expenses. I was making it work. Then one evening I came back to my dorm to find Sadie waiting with a strange expression. You got a delivery? She said, pointing to a large box on my bed. I approached it cautiously. No return address. I opened it to find a wedding dress. Not just any wedding dress. The exact one I'd once mentioned liking when Troy and I had walked past a bridal shop months ago. Pinned to it was a note. It's not too late to make the right choice. Dad. I sat down hard, my legs suddenly weak. The dress probably cost thousands. And my dad had bought it as what? A bribe? A threat? Sadie helped me pack it back in the box. We should report this, she said. It's creepy as hell. I nodded, numb. Tomorrow. I'll deal with it tomorrow. That night, I dreamed of my mom. She was wearing the wedding dress, but it was covered in dirt. Don't let them bury you, she kept saying. Don't let them bury you like they buried me. I woke up gasping, tears streaming down my face. The next day, I took the dress to Juniper's office. She documented it, took photos, added it to my growing file of evidence. They're escalating, she said, echoing my own fears. The hearing didn't deter them. If anything, it's made them more determined. I nodded, twisting my mom's charm bracelet around my wrist. What do I do? Keep documenting, keep reporting violations, and, she hesitated, have you considered a restraining order against your father too? I hadn't. Despite everything, he was still my dad. The thought of legally cutting him off felt like giving up on him completely. I'll think about it, I promised. That weekend, I was working at the bookstore when I got a text from an unknown number. Check your email. Important. Kathy. My aunt never texted me. I checked my email immediately and found a message from her with an attachment. Found this on your dad's computer when he asked me to print something. She'd written. Thought you should see it. The attachment was a letter from my dad to the University Board of Trustees. In it, he detailed concerns about my mental stability and pattern of false accusations. He claimed I had a history of seeking attention through lies and suggested the university might want to reconsider my enrollment status. He was trying to get me kicked out of school. I forwarded the email to Jasper and Juniper, my hands shaking with rage. This was a new low, even for him. Jasper called me immediately. This is actually helpful, he said. It shows a pattern of harassment and interference. We can use this if you decide to pursue legal action against your father. I thanked him and hung up, then texted my aunt. Thank you. Be careful. She replied with a single heart emoji. The next day, I met with Dean Patterson again. I showed her the letter, explained what my father was trying to do. I'm handling my own finances now, I told her. I have a job, financial aid. I'm not asking him for anything. I just want him to leave me alone. She nodded, her expression sympathetic. The university doesn't expel students based on parents' complaints, Catherine. Your academic record is excellent. You have nothing to worry about. I left her office feeling slightly better. At least that avenue of attack was closed to my dad. The following week, I was studying in the library when Troy walked in. He saw me immediately and started heading my way. I grabbed my phone, ready to call security. But before he reached me, a campus police officer stepped in front of him. Mr. Nowak, you're in violation of a restraining order, the officer said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I'm going to have to ask you to leave campus immediately. Troy's face flushed with anger. I'm here to use the library. It's a public building. Not when you're violating a court order. The officer stood firm. Leave now, or I'll arrest you. Troy glared at me over the officer's shoulder, then turned and stormed out. I sat there, heart pounding, as the officer approached. You okay, miss? I nodded. How did you know? We've been keeping an eye out. Campus security briefed us on your situation. He handed me a card. Call this number directly if he shows up again. For the first time in weeks, I felt like someone was actually on my side. The system was working, at least partially. But that night, someone smashed my dorm room window while Sadie and I were at dinner. Nothing was taken, but a wedding invitation was left on my pillow. It had my name and Troy's, with a date just 2 months away. Campus security took it seriously. They increased patrols around my dorm, installed a security camera in the hallway, offered to move me to a different building. I declined the move. I was tired of running, of being driven from place to place by fear. I'm not letting them win, I told Sadie. Not anymore. The next day, I filed for a restraining order against my father. It felt like cutting off a limb, but I knew it was necessary. He had left me no choice. The hearing was set for the following week. In the meantime, I gathered evidence. The wedding dress, the invitation, the letter to the trustees, statements from Aunt Kathy and Dean Patterson about his interference. My dad didn't show up for the hearing. The judge reviewed my evidence and granted the temporary order, with a follow-up hearing scheduled to make it permanent. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt a deep sadness. This was my dad, the man who had raised me, who had once pushed me on swings and taught me to ride a bike, before Mom died, before he changed. That evening, I was walking back to my dorm when a car pulled up beside me, my dad's silver Lexus again. But this time, it was him behind the wheel. "Catherine," he called through the open window. "Please, just 5 minutes." I stopped, keeping my distance. "You're violating the restraining order." "I know." He looked tired, older than I remembered. "I just need you to understand. Everything I've done, it's been for your own good." I shook my head. "Controlling me isn't love, Dad. It's abuse. I'm protecting you." His voice rose. "The world is dangerous for young women. Your mother, don't." I cut him off. "Don't use Mom to justify this. She would be ashamed of what you've become." His face hardened. "You don't know what she would think. You were a child when she died. I know she loved me, really loved me. Not as a possession, not as an extension of herself. As a person." I took a step back. "I'm calling the police now." "Catherine, wait." But I was already dialing, already walking away. I didn't look back. The police arrived quickly. My dad was gone by then, but I filed another report, another violation, more evidence. That night, I dreamed of my mom again, but this time she wasn't wearing the wedding dress. She was in jeans and a t-shirt, her hair loose around her shoulders. She was smiling. "You're doing great, sweetheart," she said. "Keep going." I woke up with tears on my face, but they weren't sad tears. For the first time in months, I felt like I was on the right path. The next day, I got an email from Troy's university. I had reported his behavior to their ethics board, given his status as a law student. The email informed me they were conducting an investigation. It was a small victory, but I'd take it. That afternoon, I was working at the bookstore when Sadie burst in, out of breath. "You need to see this," she said, thrusting her phone at me. It was a social media post from Troy, a long, rambling statement about how he was the victim of false accusations, how I had manipulated and used him, how he was fighting for his reputation and future, and at the end, a chilling line. "Some people won't be satisfied until they've destroyed everything, but I won't let that happen. One way or another, this ends now." I showed it to my manager, explained the situation. She let me leave early, had another employee walk me back to my dorm. I called Jasper as soon as I got there. "Is this a threat?" I asked, forwarding him the post. "It's vague enough that he could claim it wasn't directed at you specifically," Jasper said. "But given the context, yes, I'd consider it threatening. We should report it." I did, adding it to my growing file of evidence. But the post had already done its damage. People were commenting, taking sides. Some of Troy's friends were messaging me, calling me a liar, a manipulator. The online harassment continued for days. I tried to ignore it, focus on my classes, my job, but it was wearing me down. Then, a week after the post, something changed. Troy's account went silent. The harassment stopped abruptly. I found out why when Juniper called me. "Troy's been arrested," she said. "He violated the restraining order again. Someone reported him lurking outside your dorm last night." Relief washed over me. Will they keep him this time? For a while at least. And with his previous violations, he's facing serious consequences. One threat neutralized, at least temporarily. But my dad was still out there, still angry, still determined to bring me back under his control. The final hearing for the permanent restraining order against him was approaching. I gathered my evidence, prepared my statement, tried to steel myself for seeing him again. But the day before the hearing, I got a call from Aunt Kathy. "Your dad's in the hospital," she said without preamble. "Heart attack." My own heart seemed to stop. Is he okay?" "He's stable. But Catherine," she hesitated. "He's asking for you." I sat down hard. "I can't. There's a restraining order." "I know. But maybe under these circumstances," I closed my eyes thinking. Was this real? Or another manipulation? And even if it was real, did I owe him anything after everything he'd done? "I'll think about it," I said finally. I called Jasper immediately after hanging up. He confirmed what I suspected. Visiting my dad in the hospital would technically violate the restraining order, but given the circumstances, it was unlikely to be enforced. "It's your decision," he said. "But be careful. Heart attack or not, he's still the same person." I thought about it all night. By morning, I had made my decision. I would go, but not alone. I asked Sadie to come with me. The hospital was quiet when we arrived. Aunt Kathy met us in the waiting room, hugged me tightly. "He's in there," she said, pointing to a room down the hall. "I'll wait here." Sadie squeezed my hand. "I'll be right outside the door." I nodded, took a deep breath, and walked into my dad's room. He looked smaller somehow, lying in the hospital bed, older, vulnerable. When he saw me, his eyes widened. "Catherine," he said, his voice weak. "You came." I stayed by the door. "Aunt Kathy said you had a heart attack." He nodded. "Minor one. They're keeping me for observation." He gestured to the chair beside his bed. "Sit, please." I hesitated, then moved to the chair, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Dad?" He was quiet for a moment. "I've been thinking about what you said, about your mother." I waited, not trusting myself to speak. "She would be ashamed," he said finally, "of what I've become, of what I've done to you." I stared at him, shocked by the admission. "After she died, I was so afraid," he continued, "of losing you too, of failing you. I thought if I could control everything, keep you perfect, nothing bad would happen." He looked at me, his eyes wet. "But I became the bad thing, didn't I?" I nodded, my own eyes filling with tears. "Yes, I'm sorry, Catherine. I know that's not enough, but I am sorry." I wanted to believe him. Part of me desperately wanted this to be real, to have my dad back. But I'd been fooled too many times. "I need time," I said finally, "and space. The restraining order stays for now." He nodded. "I understand." I stood to leave. At the door, I turned back. "Get well, Dad." He gave me a sad smile. "I'll try." Outside, Sadie was waiting. She took one look at my face and pulled me into a hug. You okay? I nodded against her shoulder. I think so. As we left the hospital, I felt lighter somehow. Not healed, not completely. The damage my dad and Troy had done wouldn't disappear overnight. But for the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, there was a path forward. The next day, I went to the hearing for the permanent restraining order. My dad didn't show up, of course, still being in the hospital. The judge granted the order based on the evidence. As I left the courthouse, I realized something important. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was fighting back, and I was winning. That night, I sat in my dorm room, looking at the charm bracelet my mom had given me. For so long, I'd let my dad define who she was, what she would have wanted. But I had my own memories of her. Faint, but real. She had been kind, loving, free-spirited, everything my dad had tried to crush out of me. I put the bracelet on, feeling closer to her than I had in years. I'm okay, Mom, I whispered. I'm going to be okay. And for the first time in a long time, I actually believed it.